Dude, things are expensive.
They really are. Like it is, it's getting a little crazy. I don't want to say it's like too crazy out there, but it's definitely one of those times where you start to notice the price of things kind of going up, kind of creeping up on you.
I've never seen, like, you hear, we study inflation, we hear about inflation, and we see it like in some ways, like in different markets, certain stuff. But I don't know, man, just here lately, the last month or two, like I just see inflation everywhere. Like I just go to the store and things are just so expensive. And so it's actually affecting my budget now. Like we're having to make adjustments. And it's crazy. I've just never experienced that before.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of like we're used to that slow kind of creep of, year over year, things may be increasing. But I think definitely this year, I don't know if it's maybe we're just paying more attention to it this year. But I would definitely say, it's something I've noticed. And I think we're getting up to that place where you're starting to see inflation and things maybe you wouldn't during a normal year. So in economics, we learned about this thing called menu costs, which basically mean there's usually buffers in between, when something will move to the next price range. And I know like this is a small tangent that we didn't discuss talking about, but it's something I just thought of that's kind of cool. It might be helpful is think about it. If you own a restaurant, right? And things, you've got your prices listed on your menu. And let's say your prices of goods and your labor in your restaurant slowly go up. Well, there's a certain point where they've gone up just a little bit that it's still not worth you going out and printing all new menus to update your prices, right? It's still expensive because you got to go, redo the entire menu layout to get, your new prices in there and then print your whole new menus, which that's a lot of labor and work and, and money that's going to go into that. So you're not going to update your menu prices for 5 cents on a dish. You know what I mean? You're going to wait until, okay, we have to update this $2 or $3. That's going to cause you to be willing to eat the cost of updating the menus. Does that make sense?
Right.
So it's one of those things of, I think year over year, we're used to seeing those small things that are quick to update, but now we're seeing the things that's like, okay, things have made a jump. And so now a lot of other prices are jumping as well.
Right.
So I think it's kind of an interesting time for us to be able to see what actually, inflation looked like.
Yeah.
And then also reminisce about, what it was like in the crazy world of the 70s and 80s. It's just everything was crazy. So
yeah,
anything
was crazy then. It's crazy now though. Do you think that some people are, because what inflation means, I think has been skewed a little bit. Because in my mind, what inflation means is just the dollar bill's value goes down, and that's due to the government printing money,
right?
Because it's a fiat currency. But I know we're experiencing a lot of that right now, but that's not everything. There are supply chain issues because of COVID-19. There is shortage of labor, and thus wages that have gone up, not because of inflation, but because of that shortage of labor. And I know that has been, in fact, I heard in the news today that, and my wife will be very upset, that frozen waffles, for whatever reason, has been greatly affected by inflation.
Not frozen
waffles. But they also said, I know, right? But they said that it was due to supply chains, but then said it was due to inflation. So in your opinion, how do those differ by definition? Like, should we count that as inflation, or are we just blaming inflation for everything?
Yeah, I think inflation is a tough number to peg. It really is. Like, as far as saying this is the exact inflation going on with this, related to a good or a service, because I think there's a lot of, as you mentioned, industry factors within specific groups. So there could be, say there was, some issue at the frozen waffle factory, okay, where there was a significant reduction in production. That sounded great. Of frozen waffles. So in that specific instance, the price may go up because there's less supply now. But it may not be that, this is inflation affecting our frozen waffles. so it may be dependent on each industry. And also, inflation in general doesn't affect each industry the same. Some things are the same price that they've been for a really long time. Like, I think Arizona iced tea has been $1 for a really long time. McDonald's large has been $1 for a really long time. So some things maybe won't change as much. And maybe some of those are kind of set. Whereas other industries, you may experience it a little bit more. So I think it's a really tough number to be able to say exactly, how it affects each industry. But I definitely think we blame it a lot. But I think, it is a contributing factor. But there's oftentimes, as you mentioned, maybe a few underlying things that kind of also produce some higher prices. So it may not all be inflation. But I think especially, if you look at, a time where the government is printing a lot of new currency, that's going to be a time we're going to see a lot, some significant inflation. So it's one of those things of, you kind of look at a few different factors and kind of, guess what kind of plays the most part into it.
Yeah. I've noticed like our grocery bill has definitely gone up. We've had to make more choices, wiser choices, and kind of had to choose not to eat certain kinds of foods and stuff. And so, we've seen that before, but usually it was that certain industry was affected for a certain reason.
Right.
And therefore I had a price hike for a short amount of time. But it seems like it's consistent all around the board to varying degrees, but it does seem to be consistent. When we go in the grocery store, we definitely see increased prices on just about everything. So
right. And so that's something you would tie back, to looks like that's going to be some inflation involved.
Right. That's what I'm thinking. But I know that we probably blame inflation for everything. I know there's a whole lot more factors that goes into that.
And I
supply
saw one
and demand being the biggest one.
Yeah, no, I saw one tweet this week. That was an interesting thought. But it was basically saying if we say inflation this year was 5%, and obviously when you hear the number of inflation 5%, know that it's going to affect each individual differently. And I think we've said that before in another episode, looking specifically at inflation, but it, by industry, by what assets you have and what you buy, all sorts of things, can affect how much inflation you experience. But let's say you had 5% inflation this year in the things that you buy. And maybe you get to the end of the year and your company gives you a 3% raise. What this tweet was saying is that, if you really think about it, that's actually a pay decrease. You should have expected at least 5% to keep up with everything, but you got less than that. And so it's an interesting thing that we don't often think about of, maybe at your workplace, trying to vie for a little bit more to keep up with inflation, just to maintain the same salary instead of, making more. It's actually because you're having to spend more. So just to keep things level might be, a reason to ask, towards the end of the year for, some more income there. So it's an interesting thought, related to that.
Absolutely. And I mean, wages are going up everywhere. So, I mean, I don't think it's going to hurt to ask the boss if you can get a raise or something.
Yeah.
I don't think something to think about.
Yeah.
I mean, I might need to do the same. But yeah, it's crazy. Wanted to take a look. I saw an article on CalvaryWise.com. I don't know what that means.
I don't know either.
But they had a good article on 9 bad money habits you need to stop ASAP. And I thought we could take a look at that. 1, see if it even is a bad habit. And 2, if it's a bad habit, what do you do about it? How do you break that?
Yeah.
And so I thought we'd just kind of go through this. There's like 9 points. So we'll kind of go through them quickly and just kind of see, either debunk or say, hey, yeah, that's definitely a bad habit, and just kind of see what we need to do about it. So the first one is very simple, and it actually mentions in the description, COVID-19 related, is not preparing for an emergency. And I think we all, I'm speaking for majority of Americans, including myself, we have all had a situation in probably the past year and a half where there was an emergency and we needed to take care of that. So my opinion, absolutely, we need to prepare for emergencies, and specifically having an emergency fund. Yeah.
No, I totally agree. There's Murphy's Law is out there for a reason. What can go wrong will go wrong. So I think, having an approach to that of like, hey, stuff's going to go wrong. And so I think a lot of times we set stuff up for if everything goes perfectly. Like, it'll work if everything goes perfectly. But I think a lot of times there's going to be something that's going to go wrong. So at least putting a little buffer in there of, an emergency fund or having some margin in your month to month, spending and between your income and expenses. So I think that's a no-brainer you need to have something there, because stuff's always going to go wrong.
Yeah,
you need to be
that's good. I like your point of having emergency fund, but also having a buffer maybe in your budget, taking whatever that margin that you have is, take a tiny little amount of margin and put that to just like a miscellaneous, or just put that away as a buffer of some sort. We do that ourselves. We got a little bit of a buffer in our checking account. We don't even look at it. It doesn't go to anything. It's just a buffer in case something happens, so I don't get an overdraft fee to the savings. And you know what I mean? So having that little bit of buffer, that's a big deal.
Yeah, no, and definitely I like your point on the miscellaneous category in the budget. I think that one's a big one that you should have, because stuff always comes up. We forget somebody's birthday is this month, and we gotta go out and do that, or decide to go do something kind of last minute. And it's nice just to have a little bit of room in that miscellaneous, so it's not like, oh well, I guess we can't eat, because we gotta go to this thing, So just have a little bit of room, I think goes a long way. I got
an example of a account fee or a late fee on an insurance thing that I didn't pay in time. So miscellaneous, have it. Yeah, I pulled this out because I crumbled it. I was very upset.
I bet. Yeah,
it's only $15, but it's like I didn't expect
still
that.
Hurts.
So anyway, it hurts. $15 hurts. Okay, so the second one was bad habit: spending as much as you earn or spending more than you earn. I think this is more towards the budgeting that we're talking about, having a budget. But even if you do have a budget and all your money is put in the budget, I know we talk about a zero-based budget, but like, don't have it going all to your expenses. Like, you need to still have that margin that we're talking about. So, zero is good. You need to put your dollars in it, go into something. Was it Robert Kiyosaki said that it was like dollars are like soldiers, you need to put them out and, or no, it's a Shark Tank guy. He said that, I forgot his name. I think it was Mr. Wonderful.
Yeah.
He said it was this little army men, and they come back and they bring more. So you definitely need to put every dollar to use, but don't put it all to expenses. Definitely need to have margin, go into savings and investing and stuff like that. And then don't spend more than you earn, because how are you going to pay your bills? Somebody's going to have to swipe a credit card. So that's
how you get more
habit.
in the hole. Yeah. I think, you've heard, those listening, you've heard Cody and I say this, and it's really the formula that we believe. And, you really research any other financial person out there. This is the formula: is spend less than you make and invest the difference. Like, that's really the formula, and it's always going to be there. So if you're spending everything you're making, or if you're spending more than you make, obviously that's going to be a problem. But if you really want to get ahead, that's the way to do it. That's the template that's been laid out, is you have to make that expenses less than the income, or make the income more than the expenses. Either way, you've got to have a gap there, and then you got to do something with that. That's, always going to be the formula.
Yeah. So number 3, bad habit number 3 is waiting till you, and there's quotes, have more money to save or invest. Now, what's your thoughts on that one?
I agree with that. If I'm, reading it, how I'm thinking, or how they intended. I think sometimes we get in this thought of, well, I only have this. So let's say, you only had $100 a month that you could put towards whatever your next goal. If you want to pay off some credit cards, or if you want to maybe start investing, it's like, oh, I only have $100, so I'm gonna wait until I've got $300 a month or something. I'm just kind of making up some numbers. But what we often miss is that it's so useful just to even put what you have in place, because oftentimes you'll find you'll make excuses later as well. Like, if you make excuses now as to why you can't utilize what you have, then when you do have more later, there'll always be something else that'll come up and want to use that.
Yeah.
So what I'd say is start with what you have. Just start. If it's, again, whatever you got, if it's $20, $50 a month, whatever you can do, start there. And then you'll find it's easier to grow once you at least start. So don't worry about, I can't max out my retirement accounts yet. Start with what you can and then work up to that. So I think too many times we overthink it and think we need to have some big number. And really, whatever much or little you have, just start and you'll find it kind of works its way up from there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I agree with that. Like, it's just starting is half the battle.
Yeah, it's understanding compound interest is
That's
really
true.
what it is. If you have any form of margin, if you think of, let's say you've got debts, well, interest is working against you. So even if you don't have enough, maybe you don't even have enough to make the full payment, but you have something, you need to be putting it there because something's better than nothing, especially when there's compound interest interest working against you. And then when you've got just something, maybe it's a small amount. We talk about 15% of your income. You don't need to be waiting till you've built enough margin to then have 15% of your income. Let's say you pay off your debts and you're ready to start investing. So you wait until you've got 15% margin ready to go, and then you open up an IRA. Let's not do that. Let's find whatever we can. Let's scrounge up. Let's go ahead and open up that IRA the best we can. The only time I could say that may be the case that you need to wait is if there's a minimum to open up that account, but usually that's only like $1,000. And so I can understand, but even then you still need to be saving it. Let's say you've only got $50, save that $50 till you get up to the 1,000 and then throw it in to an IRA and then keep throwing that $50 in until you can grow that margin. I mean, you need to, that's not going to be enough, but throw it in a calculator. Go to, I think it's investmentcalculator.com. Just throw it in there, take a look, put 8% interest rate. That's a really conservative interest rate, especially in a standard index fund. See what that looks like. $50 a month. It's a pretty number after a couple years.
Yeah.
It looks nice, especially after 30 or 40.
Yeah.
It looks really good.
So, no, I totally agree with that. And just practically, my wife and I, we had to do that when we first got married. And it was something I had to get over. So as far as like practically applying this, I wanted to get to that 15%. Going towards retirement. But when we first got married, we did not have 15% to put towards retirement. Yeah. So what we ended up deciding to do is we just did what we could. And that's what we started with. And it became a goal then to get up to the 15%. And so that's something we were able to achieve, and we worked, hard to get to it. And now we've been able to maintain that. But it didn't happen instantly. Like, we had a lot of expenses right out of the gate. My wife was still going through school, so we had a lot of bills, associated with that. And so it was something that we decided we're going to do what we can until we can do what we want to. And so I definitely echo, what you said on that, Cody, of, we set guidelines, but do whatever you can till you can get up to that. Don't feel like you gotta wait. You, as to your point, you lose out on a lot of growth, and I think momentum as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Something's always better than nothing.
Yep.
All right, number 4, bad habit, relying on loans to pay your bills. Ouch.
Yeah, I think ouch. I mean, I think that kind of goes back to, don't spend more than you make. I feel like that's where that comes in. And visions come to mind of like the payday loans with crazy interest rates, trying to make it work. And I just, I feel very strongly about those in my hatred towards them. But it's just something I hope no one would ever have to turn to basically bury yourself trying to make it to next month or make it to the next paycheck. I think it does a lot more harm than good, unfortunately. When people are already in a vulnerable place, and then you make it even worse by having crazy interest rates associated with your loans.
Yeah, and there's apps out there that make this really easy. Some banks have this as well. I think there's one called Chime. It's a completely mobile bank, and they'll give you your paycheck like 3 days earlier than your payday. But they may look great, but there are some hidden words in that document that you agree on, the terms and services. And it's not good if that paycheck doesn't come in, and we don't know what's going to happen. And I'm not saying that there isn't a time maybe somebody really, really, really has to have that loan. I'm not saying that there isn't some case out there where that's the case, but I mean, it is not a good idea. It is not a good idea at all. Definitely, I would consider this a very bad habit. So be very careful when you see those kinds of apps. I just want to throw that out there. And they're not coming to mind what their names are, but I see them on commercials all the time. And I know that banks are starting to give out those kinds of incentives, but they're actually, to my knowledge, loans. So definitely be careful when you take a look at those.
Right. Yeah. So I think definitely getting on a good footing, to our point before, of spending less than you make, I think takes care of this one. So it's kind of, for me, it's kind of part of that other one of just make sure you're spending less than you make, and then you won't run into this problem.
Yeah. So that one's like, I guess, more of getting a loan to handle those bills. But I mean, that's the same thing as swiping a credit card as well. So
right. Unless you got the money. Yeah.
Right. So number 5, not taking control of your income streams. And this one's kind of weird. Didn't quite understand what this means, but I started reading, and it was just talking about having consistency in your paydays, having a consistency in your job. And I don't know what your thoughts are. I think that's important, but I think that really just depends on who you are, what the job is. Because, I mean, you could be commission-based that you only get paid once a month, but it may be a good amount. And if you're able to manage that, then there's no problem there. You know, you don't need to have a paycheck every week.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could see that being a positive of having a consistent paycheck, but I mean, I think it depends on what your job is. Like, I know a few people that do seasonal work, you know, like putting up Christmas lights or things like that, where they do so much work during one part of the year, and that's where the majority of their income comes in. And then it kind of, you know, maybe they do some other stuff the other parts of the year, but really they're working so much in those few months. So I think it depends. I think more planning has to go into it to make sure you're good and you don't run out of money the rest of the year. Or if you have an inconsistent paycheck, you know, to your point of like if you're strictly commission, you want to make sure you've got a little bit maybe more buffer in, say, an emergency fund to cover any oops in kind of the timing, because you don't want to be like, oh, bills are due, I've got nothing.
Right.
So kind of to the last point. So I don't know if I'd say it's a goal to make it more consistent, depending on what your job is. But I would say, you know, gaining control of your income could be a really big thing. We talk about side hustles all the time. You know, we talk about selling things that you don't need to get a little quick boost of income. And then really applying yourself at your job or your career to grow that income as well. So I think multiple income streams, and then, you know, growing the ones you have, I think that's definitely a way to take control. So I don't know if I'd say I'd shoot for, you know, just having it be consistent. I think you want to grow it no matter what it is. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say this isn't exactly a bad habit per se. It's more of just a...
I mean, if you don't have income coming in, then I think that's, you know, obviously a problem. But I think if you have a seasonal job or something, you know, I think that's fine. You just need to be a little more planned out with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So number 6, it's really is not a financial. This could be applied to anything, but it says constantly blaming others for your mistakes.
Dang. Just going right for it on this one.
I mean, I guess maybe, I don't know, maybe blaming your spouse over a purchase. I don't know. Really don't know what this one's talking about.
I think it could be also economic situation where you start out. I think that could definitely be a thing
that's true. Like blaming.
Some of it I don't think is like, let me clarify. Like, I don't know if you're necessarily blaming others. I think, you know, where you start out is where you start out. But I think, you know, some people can kind of, I think really wherever you start out, you can easily blame others and say like, I don't know, I could just feel like I know people that no matter where they're at, they could find a way to make it somebody else's fault. You know what I mean? Like, if they started out in a really rough kind of economic background, they'll say, well, I was just brought up in this is what I was destined to be. Other people held me down, whatever. But and then if they were raised in like, some really high, economic, kind of status, and they were given everything, they'd be like, well, I wasn't really taught this, I kind of just had it handed to me. So it's their fault for not teaching me. You know what I mean? Like, I just know people that can, no matter what it is, they will find an excuse. It's always somebody else's fault.
I think you are right on the money of what they're talking about, because I started reading the article, that paragraph, which I probably should have done beforehand, but whatever.
That probably would have been good.
There were some examples of like, it was my parents who refused to teach me about financial freedom. Things like, it was my silly friend who introduced me to this Ponzi scheme. So I guess it's what it's saying is, you're the one that made the mistake. Own it. Move on. Don't blame others. And I think what it's trying to say is, when we blame others, we tend to devalue that financial situation as that's someone else's fault, that's someone else's problem, therefore I'm not going to handle it. Where it's still our financial situation. It may not even be your fault. It may be your friend's stupid Ponzi scheme, but you are the one that invested in your friend's idea. In fact, I was watching The Big Bang Theory with my wife, and there was a scene where this guy comes up to the nerds and says, look, guys, I got a great idea. 3D glasses, but for just regular TVs. Like it turns any movie into 3D. And they're all like, that's impossible. He's like, no, you need to invest in this now. And I'm thinking, like, you'd lose a lot of money in that deal right there.
Right.
So don't do those deals. And if you do those deals, own up to those deals, own up to what you did, and move forward. So I think that's what that's talking about.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, I think you're on that one.
Yeah, I think, I don't want to discredit. There could be situations where people were maybe taken advantage of or not given good information, and maybe they lost a lot, or maybe they just didn't have a lot of information to start out with. So I'd say one thing that's difficult is recognizing, okay, somebody may have wronged me. Maybe they did, or maybe, it's just your own fault in that. But I'd say regardless, own the solution. So if it's, you find yourself in a problem, I think a great thing is, regardless of how you got there, you own the solution of you getting out, which is really empowering when you come to that of, if you want to fix it, all right, you figure it out. What do you need to do? And I think that's a mindset thing more than in a lot of areas, to what you said, not just money. Right. I think, owning up to it and just saying, okay, I'm going to figure out, it may not have been my fault, or maybe it was, but I'm going to be in charge of the solution.
Gotcha. So number 7, and I actually finished reading that paragraph, and what I think you are going to interpret it as is going to be different from what they are mentioning. But it's both are going to be very good. So I'm going to see if this is what you're thinking.
See.
So it's number 7. Bad habit is hoarding money.
Okay.
So what do you think?
I think of like hoarding cash, like sticking it in a mattress. Yeah, that's what I think. I think just saving instead of actually doing stuff and making your money work for you. I think of your money's just sitting there. The coffee can buried in the yard, under the mattress, in the drawer, that type of stuff. That's what I think.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It was like having maybe just a bunch of money in the bank and just not doing anything. Inflation's hitting it. There's no interest rates helping it. It's not invested. That's what I was thinking. What they were mentioning was more of just using your money. Don't hoard money just to be rich. Have a mindset of money does not control me. I control what what my money does. Be a giver, set aside for leisure, give to causes that matter, stuff like that. So this is saying more of like, don't be an old miser. Don't be, Scrooge McDuck and just hoard money for the sake of money just because you want to be rich, which is actually something we talked about last podcast about what is rich. So check that out if you haven't heard that. But what we're thinking is, hey, if you have cash sitting there, after about 5 years, that's not helping you. You need to put that to something, which I would say both bad habits.
Yeah, so. I think both are good. Yeah, no, as far as the kind of the Scrooge McDuck analysis of that one, I've heard, other people say, as far as holding money with a clenched fist versus an open hand. I don't know if you've heard that analogy, Cody. It's probably pretty common. But just saying that, if you hold so tightly, to money, no more can get in. But if you kind of open it up and allow it to flow, yes, they say, if you give freely, it kind of frees it up rather than it's kind of just all like stopped up and you don't give anything out. So I would agree with, that point. And then, also kind of, to our point as well, if you've got money just sitting in a bank, unless it's used for a specific purpose, I think you need to put it to work for you. Because I think one thing we get, half of it is we get the saving part, but we don't transfer that also over into investing. And so we have money just sitting in an account, but it's not doing anything for us. So I think you got to make your money work as hard as you do. So investing is a great way of making your money work for you. And so if it's just sitting there in a bank account, again, unless it's for a specific use, like an emergency fund, I would say that's something where it's more like insurance than investing, because it's sitting there just in case. But for most other things, unless you're saving for a short-term goal, I would say if it's just sitting there, it's not working as much for you as you could get out of there. But I think either way, either interpretation, I think is helpful.
Yeah.
So you're right on that. Yeah.
So number 8 is saving without a goal. Bad habit is saving without a goal. I definitely think that could be a bad habit. I could see somebody as like saving money because they have some margin or investing and they don't really know what they want to do with it yet. I don't see that being necessarily a problem. But if you don't have goals for any of your margin, I would say that's a problem. So if you don't, invest for a specific reason, aka retirement, or maybe early retirement, or 529 plans for your kids, stuff like that, definitely need to have goals and accounts that are specific to those goals. And so I would say that's definitely important. But I'm not going to say it's 100% bad habit to save without a goal. Maybe you got a little bit of margin that's just extra and you don't know what to do with it. That may be a good buffer for something. Maybe you want to put it towards something fun, but you don't know what that is yet. I'm not going to say that that's necessarily a bad habit. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'll give a practical example of at least what I thought of when you read this. Of like, I am a principal saver. So I save because I know that's how you get ahead, right? So I say, all right, we need to set aside some money out of every paycheck. We need to set some aside every month. It needs to be going towards something. Whereas my wife, which is where it's great to have a spouse that can help you, is she says, why? Why do we do that? She needs specific goals that we're working towards. Otherwise, for her, it feels like we are, kind of just hoarding it or you're just saving it. But it's more like, oh no, we're doing it for this purpose. So that's one thing she's helped me out with a lot is I need to articulate to her, okay, here's what we're saving. Here's what it's going towards. This is our goal. Right. And then the other thing I thought of as well is I think it gives you more motivation if you do have a goal. So if you put a dollar amount or a percentage goal to it, I think that helps incentivize you, to get there rather than, I just do this every month. And it's more like a, something you can go achieve. So I think that maybe is also what they were, intending with that. So I think it's something good. To your point, I don't know if it's necessarily a bad habit not to have a goal in mind. I think it's definitely optimal. What are you doing it for? But I don't think it's like, oh, you wasted it because you didn't have a plan for it yet. But I could see where they're saying have a plan, know where your money's going, so it doesn't kind of just sit there. I think.
Yeah, I wouldn't label this as a bad habit, but like you said, it is optimal. I think that's a good way of putting it. But I mean, if you're saving, then that's a good habit. So
you're
I wouldn't
there.
necessarily label it as bad habit.
Yeah, but, you're setting the money aside. So I think just, I think there's more benefits to having some goals that you can try to get to.
Yeah, but definitely optimal if you have goals.
Yeah.
All right, so last one. This was a really good one. Number 9, bad habit is dipping into your savings.
Yeah.
This
I would
hits.
agree with that.
Yeah.
That one hits me.
Yeah.
I really try not to. But sometimes it just happens. And it's usually, and this is where it gets us, is it's usually not emergencies because you've got the emergency fund, right?
Yeah.
So it's those extra things of, well, we were going to use it for that, but we're going to use it for this instead. And sometimes that works out to our benefit of like, yeah, we'd rather do this other thing. But sometimes it's like, oh yeah, we were saving that for that thing. And now we moved it somewhere else. And so
Right.
now we have less in that goal of getting there. So I definitely fall into this,
Yeah.
this bad habit.
Yeah, I mean, especially if because we had a podcast about how we were paying for the trip that we're going to take, where we're going to see each other.
Yeah.
In Utah, and you had mentioned that you guys were actually able to cash flow that, and that is optimal. And then for me, I actually had to pull out of a savings account because my wife and I talked about it. And we're like, this opportunity is super important to us, and we're okay with pushing down this goal about 3 or 4 months. And so, not optimal. Not saying that it's super bad, but not optimal. Not saying you can't do that, but definitely would. If you could cash flow it, I would say definitely shoot for that. So dipping into your savings is like, it's nice that you have savings. It depends on the goal, is really what I'm going to say is with that, if it's a bad habit or not. Let's say you are saving up to buy a house, maybe down payment, and then you just go, I'm going to buy a Tesla. That might be a bad idea. I don't know. I don't know your situation. Maybe maybe you need a Tesla. I'd like a Tesla. And I'm saying this because I look at my bank account and I look at Teslas and I'm like,
Right. Which one would I rather have? Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I've got that margin. I could make that monthly payment.
Yeah.
Don't do that. But I guess I don't know. Would you label this as a bad habit?
Well, I'd say if it's, it really depends. I think it's what your savings goal is, but also what are you spending it on? To your point, if it's something you don't really need, then, or if it's maybe due to a lack of planning, then I would say it's a bad habit. I would say if you're kind of making it work, this is truly what you prioritize and want to do, then, maybe it's not the best, but I think you could still make it work. Again, to our point, it's, not optimal. Like maybe it's better to cash flow it. Cause for me, I like to, when I say I'm going to set aside for something, that it is set aside for that. It reduces so much of the temptation to do this. So anytime I do have to draw from savings, I want to make sure I have valid reasons as to why I'm doing it, and not just like, oh, something was on sale. I really wanted just to buy it, so I'm going to take out of this,
Right.
savings, unless that's really what I wanted to do. But I try to be strict with myself and say, no, I set it aside for this. I'm not going to touch it unless I have a good reason.
Yeah. And it is a bad habit. So if you do it once for a very specific goal, or, you have a great opportunity or something like that, understandable, but not as a habit. I would not want to
make it a habit.
Yeah. Because, back in my early years of learning financial freedom and doing this kind of stuff, I would have margin, I would have good savings, I'd be debt free. But one of my main problems was budgeting, and I still struggle with budgeting, but I was really bad then. And there would be times when something just came up and I don't have the money in the checking account. I've got the money, but I don't have the money in the checking account. And like what you were saying, I used to just save money. They didn't have a goal. There was no point. I would just throw money into the savings account.
Right.
And then I would have to go back out of the savings account and then put it into the checking account to be able to pay for whatever that bill is.
Yeah.
And, and at that point, all that is just bad planning. It's just bad planning, bad budgeting. That shouldn't happen. You shouldn't have to do that. Right.
Yeah.
And so I would say in that case, yeah, that's definitely a bad habit. And I had that. This is definitely a habit I've had to break, is a bad habit of, oh, this came up. Oh, I don't have the money in the checking account. It's in savings. I saved it. I got to pull it back out, put it back in here. And then in my bank account, I've only got, I think it's 6 times that I can pull out of my savings account a month. And so that could definitely become a problem if you've built a habit of dipping into your savings.
Right.
You know, so I wouldn't recommend it. Now, I'm not saying that it's not the case for sinking funds. Sinking funds, that's a whole different story. That's really not savings. That's something that's specifically there to pay for your bills.
Right.
But we're just talking a general savings account.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a habit I had to break.
Yeah, no, I think this habit, it's like trying to store water in a leaky bucket. That's really what it is. Like, if you really want to reach whatever goal you have, you got to plug, stop the leak.
Yeah. I like how you said that right as my cup was leaking.
That was very nice. What timing on that? But I think it's
Like,
true.
why is this wet? Oh,
yeah. Because if you keep trying to, fill it up, but you're draining it at the same time, you're not going to get there as fast. So I think
unless you get another cup and you're just like this,
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah. So I think, have a purpose, have a goal, and set it for that. And then, to your point, plan so you don't have to touch it. So things don't come up that, you need to pull from it.
Yeah. Well, that's it. That was 9 bad habits. I think 2 of these, I think we decided were not necessarily bad habits, just something to kind of keep in mind. So
yeah, maybe not optimal. And plenty of those we have been victim to in our life. We have definitely, fallen under those. And I think a good budget, it's basic, but I think we keep going back to it. A good budget solves a lot of those.
Yeah. Budget, margin, no debt, investing.
Yeah.
It's just consistency. Just stay with it. And that's usually where I fail in this, is when I'm not consistent.
Yeah.
When I kind of let the budget slide, and I do this a lot. And then you're like, oh, I didn't plan that very well. And then I start getting a leaky bucket or a cup. So
yeah. No, totally true. But I think that's a good list. Thanks for sharing it. It was interesting going through all of them.
Yeah, we'll try to go through some more kind of debunking stuff like this. I like pulling up articles like this because it's what people see a lot. When people have financial questions, they tend to just quickly Google and then they get these articles. And so it's information that's out there that a lot of people have actually read this article. And so I like to go through it, kind of see what's the good, the bad, the pros and cons. And so, but if you guys enjoyed this episode, please reach out to us. Let us know about it. If you get any questions about these bad habits, you want to break one of these bad habits, if you have another bad habit, if you think that wasn't a bad habit, just reach out to us. Let us know. Ask us questions. Go to www.willandcody.com, and we got a contact us page. You can submit your question there. You can also reach out to us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, all the other places. And then also, I believe, on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts.
Yep, we're out there.
And I think we're on like Breaker and Anchor and a couple other places. So
hit us up.
Yeah, we're just popping up everywhere now. So, but yeah, guys, just send us some questions. We'd really enjoy it. And we'll see you guys next week.
See you guys.